Good afternoon. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Athens City Planning Commission. It's October 30th, 2005. It is 2:37, and we have a quorum present. There are 3 people here, and that constitutes a quorum, and I don't think there's anything that bringing up that would cause a problem with not having a 4th vote, or 4 votes. So. If you plan to say something, we take sworn testimony. We stand and raise your right hand. Do you affirm that what you have to say will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. I'm going to strangle myself with this wire, I think. The first case is 05-0507. Mr. Drew Ford was refused a zoning permit application for 188 North Lancaster Street. And this is a business, so that if there's a problem, it comes to the Planning Commission because of the business nature of the request. In here there is letter from Steve, and there is a refusal, and there is a drawing, and an explanation from Mr. Ford. Are you Mr. Ford?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to make some statement, or you go up there to the microphone and identify yourself, so your name and where you live, okay?
I'm Drew Ford, and you'll have to excuse me because I really don't know how all of this works. You have to excuse my ignorance. I'm hoping to put a business in at 188 North Lancaster Street. It's my understanding that the building has been grandfathered as a business in an R1 zone. And my understanding is this is the reason I'm here is it's a change of business, a type of business. It has always, years ago it was a motorcycle shop, but since then it has been a food establishment. And I'm proposing to put in a dental laboratory, and the impact that I would have on the area in an R1 would be minimal to none. A pizza place would create a lot of traffic, and we would have no traffic. We have no customers. All of my business, I go to the dentist's office and then come back. There's parking out front that it has been sectioned off for a business loading zone, and I initially thought that it'd be nice to be able to keep that. However, I have talked to the people at the Church of God down the street, and it's about a block away, and they gave me a verbal okay, their board is going to vote tomorrow, but to let us park down there. So that would actually open the parking in front of that. The city could come in and take the business loading zone out, and that would leave actually more parking for the area. There's no, like I said, there's no traffic in and out. As far as things like trash pickup, I don't generate any more than a regular household would. On trash days, I would just have a can out there. I've talked to one person who used to live directly across from this when it was Firehouse Pizza, and they said that there were numerous times that they had to go over and complain. Firehouse would have their music up real loud, doors open late in the evenings. My hours are during the week, normal business hours. Evenings, weekends, the building would be pretty much vacant. What else? I plan on, if I get it, cleaning up, making it presentable. I'm not going to change the footprint of the building at all. I'm just going to renovate the inside to bring my stuff in. I don't create any types of toxins. You know, it's a pretty clean business.
Where is your business now?
It is off of East State Street, behind the Maplewood, next to the TV Supply.
Oh, okay.
And I've been in that office for 16 years, but I'm renting, and I'm running out of room.
And the parking's not any better there than it is?
I'm sorry?
The parking's not any better there for you than it would be
No.
on Lancaster? Yeah.
I thought that, I know if it's a change of use, but I thought that building had lost its grandfather clause because it hadn't been operating for over a year. Hasn't had anything in it. No food business, nothing. So I don't think it's grandfathered for business. Yeah, isn't that one of the problems?
My name's Steve Pearson. I'm the zoning administrator for the city of Athens, Ohio. As far as I'm concerned, and I believe my interpretation of the code is correct, that grandfathering is only for certain use categories. That's why the only businesses that have been in there most recently are ones that had to do with food service. So that grandfathering for commercial is only extended to those types of businesses that the zoning code identifies in that category. It would be my understanding that even if there was a bakery or a pizza shop in there today and Mr. Ford asked for this, the grandfathering is essentially lost because the use is changing. It's not the same type of use. It could have a different kind of impact. Although the presentation is for a business with lesser impact, it could be that the business proposed to replace a pizza shop would be of greater impact. And therefore, personally, I wouldn't extend that grandfathering to all commercial use, and I didn't. That's why I refused the permit. There was a sandwich pizza shop in there. I'm not sure if it's been over a year. It may have been close to a year ago that it operated, but there was a pizza shop in there, not in recent times.
I think it's been empty for more than a year because I go past there all the time.
The reason that we're here today is Mr. Ford would like to go to the zoning board and ask for a use variance. Although in some municipalities, some might see that as akin to a spot zoning. The City of Athens zoning code does allow the zoning board to grant use variances, but only after the proposal has first been reviewed by the Planning Commission, and the Commission makes a recommendation then back to the zoning board. The board may or may not follow the recommendation of the Planning Commission, but the law does require that original input from the Planning Commission. I gave you a copy of that section of the code that pertains to this, and it's worded the way it has always been worded. It says the Planning Commission shall review the particulars of the case in light of the comprehensive plan. So I'm not sure if we're talking about the 75 plan that everyone agreed to, or I believe it was the 92 Planning Commission.
This would be the 92 one, that's the plan.
Well, that's a strategic plan.
Well, it's still a city plan. That stuff of strategic and city plan is just even I don't split hairs like that, and I usually do, but I think that's the one we consider the plan.
Right. And to be very honest with you, I'm not sure that even the draft comprehensive plan discusses issues such as this, but the law has always had that language in it. Planning Commission review in light of the comprehensive plan.
One of the problems here is that when we talked about uses in an R1 zone, we could begin to enumerate all of the possible uses, and I don't think that dental laboratory ever occurred to any of us. So we really would have to, as far as permissible uses in an R1 zone, if we're talking about business uses, we really have to look at comparing the impact of this kind of business with the other businesses that we said would be acceptable.
Recent revisions to the zoning code have allowed home occupations with up to one person allowed to work with you in your home. So if Mr. Ford lived there, the area that he used for his lab was less than 50% of the floor area. He had no more than one person from the outside helping him, and there were no unusual exterior displays that would identify it as anything but just a residence in an R1. I could have issued a permit for that. This area at that intersection, if you're familiar with it, the Job and Family Services is right there. That's zoned B1. Right across the street, the larger homes on the I guess you'd call that the north side of Lancaster Street. That's zoned R3, multifamily residential.
And the cemetery's in that triangle, isn't it?
Yeah,
The,
but you go up here.
this triangle, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the
You go-
cemetery up
it's
there.
right in there,
Okay,
'cause
good.
that's
There
where I
was
go
an
all the time.
exhibit that I attached to it
Yeah.
to show you, what the area is like. This building appears to have been constructed, for commercial purposes, but when that area was zoned in 1960, if you're familiar with it or not, there's a house in between this building and Job and Family Services, and for some reason, the business line was drawn between the house and the Job and Family Services building rather than 2 lots down between the house farther up on Lancaster Street and this particular location.
You sure it wasn't a garage once years and years and years ago?
My understanding was that way back when it was a motorcycle shop.
Yeah, but before that, a garage that a house would have.
Boy, I don't know.
Like for this house that's next
Yeah,
to
or
it?
one on either side. For some reason, I have that, this would be years before I came here to live, but going up there when I was an undergraduate, I swear it was a garage that went with a house.
When I came here in 1994, it was Firehouse Pizza.
I'm
And
talking
has
about
remained off and
1940s.
on a pizza shop or a bakery.
She's talking before there
I'm
were
talking about the 1940s,
motorcycles.
the late 1940s and early 1950s. But that, I think, I have that in my mind, why the line would have been drawn that way, because that wouldn't have been a thing like that. I'll check it out. But if we had down there on, was it Hudson or Lorraine, wasn't there a dentist's office down there? He didn't live in there, didn't he? Wasn't there a dentist? Was that R1?
Yeah.
Cutler, is Cutler?
Yeah,
Was-
that's another thing in an R1 that is permitted, professional occupation, doctor, dentist, they are allowed also to have an office in their own home.
Well, he doesn't live there. Dr. Cutler does not live there.
Right. I guess what I'm referring to is, Ms. Cohn had alluded to things that are permitted in an
Yeah,
R1
well,
zone, and that is
you do,
another,
yeah.
another operation, commercial operation
He
that is
has,
permitted
he's
in
a
a
lawyer and
residence.
he operates out of his own house, right?
Yeah, the learned professions is, I think, what the code used to say, and we actually have a local court case on what the learned professions are. And unfortunately, in that case, it did not include real estate,
Yeah, that was the one we
Well,
had.
this-
what the problem was about.
This building doesn't have any space for residents anyway, does it? Isn't it?
It's basically just
Small,
one
yeah.
square, open
Square.
room.
Yeah.
It's not very large, actually. There is no parking. The parking on the street, the reason that's a loading zone was the service safety director had directed the street department to post it that way, just so the bakeries or the pizza shops or whatever were there would have a place to pull up to,
Yeah.
to make deliveries. It has remained posted that way, although even though there hasn't been a business there, those signs could have been taken down.
I thought that was so the dealers could go up there. Isn't that this place that was supposed to be the place where drug dealers went? You
I'm
don't know?
not sure, you'd have to ask the police department about it.
They didn't tell me that, somebody else told me that. Not when it was a pizza parlor. But
No.
after that, it was some kind of other thing.
I think the comments that
had
Mr.
food.
Ford made too about impact to the neighborhood are very legitimate. He's going to have a lot less traffic than businesses had there previously. He's not going to have evening hours where, a pizza shop or a bakery would be having that activity and that traffic going on at night. Nothing going on the weekends. It almost seems like something that an occupation that could fit in to an R1 zone. And it does in the zoning code, but you have to live in the building also for it to be permitted by right.
Could you put a flower box in front of it? I drive up that way all the time and I always test it out.
What about, is this something where it would be necessary or appropriate to have supportive comments from the adjoining landowners? Or is
This
that a-
review by the Planning Commission, the law doesn't require notification of adjoining property owners. Excuse me. However, at the Board of Zoning Appeals, that is a requirement.
It will.
All adjoining property owners will be notified. The agendas that I do for the zoning board now are forwarded to all of the neighborhood associations. So there will be notification in the newspaper prior to the meeting. So the immediately adjacent property owners will be specifically notified. It'll be advertised in the paper. The agendas are run on the government channel and also at the city website. If you click on zoning board, the agendas are available there too. So there will be, wide publication of this hearing when it makes it to that level.
So one route would be for the Planning Commission to recommend that this go to the zoning board for a variance?
You can recommend that you think it's fine. You can recommend that you think it's not fine. You could recommend you don't really have any opinion one way or the other. If you look at the ordinance, it doesn't really, it's not real clear about what it is exactly the planning
Touch base
commission
with
is
the
supposed to
planning
do,
commission.
except do what we're doing right now. And
Well, didn't we all, used to be, have to approve any change in business in an area like that? If there was a question of business, and we had to take some action and send it back to them and say, this is what we recommend, but they've kind of taken,
I would say traditionally that the zoning board has taken the recommendation of the planning commission. Although as you read the language of the code, it
they
doesn't
don't have to.
It doesn't say that they have to follow your recommendation.
Now, if we recommended
Traditionally,
this,
they have.
if we recommended this change in use, or however you want to express it, does that mean that in the future, Mr. Ford wants to sell the property to somebody else for some different use? It's going to have to go through this whole procedure again, right?
The
Can we-
Board of Zoning Appeals, in rendering their decisions, can attach conditions and safeguards. And at that time, the board could say, well, if Mr. Ford ever leaves, the variance goes away. Or if he sells the business, that's fine, so long as it stays this type of business. So the zoning board are the ones that do have the ability to have conditions and safeguards. Like I say, this is very unusual. Most cities don't have this use and business variance procedure that we have in Athens, because it is essentially akin to spot zoning. Although, I think the safeguard at this level is that the planning commission is supposed to be looking at the whole picture. Where the zoning board is just focusing right down on one lot and just looking at it. I think it's a chance to, if it's obviously glaring that, this is just not anything we want in this particular zone, the planning commission would have a better overall view of that than the Board of Zoning Appeals might.
You ready for a motion?
Does anybody else have any? Yes.
I move that the Planning Commission recommend this to the Board of Zoning Appeals for for specific, what do I call it besides spot zoning? For a use, a variance, for a use variance, to be made in consideration of the fact that this particular use will have less impact on the neighborhood than the current designation, and that the variance will be only attached to this particular business. If the business changes, then it has to be considered again.
I'll second that.
Is there any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Okay. Well, we don't have any more cases, but we have communications. We have two, that one. We have a letter from Steve Pearson to Lance Rep regarding zoning designation for the annexation of University Estates. Have they asked for annexation? Yeah. Okay. I don't know if they've even taken these steps yet, have they?
Maybe Steve would.
Steve, what? Steve, have they started this annexation stuff yet? University Estates.
My understanding is that the annexation petition has been filed with the county commissioners. They're in the process. State law requires that they have a certain period of time that they have to hold on to the application. I want to say it's 60 days. They have to hold a public hearing. The commissioners vote on it. If they vote favorably, it's forwarded to the clerk of council, and then the procedure takes off on the city level from there, where the presentation goes to the city council. It's also, council has to hold on to it for a while, hold a public hearing. The question that was going on there was what zoning designation do we have for University Estates when it's annexed? We were at this point quite a while back, because I think this is the fourth attempt by University Estates to annex. And I think there's some question about is PUD actually a zoning designation? So I had a conversation, I don't know if it's included in what you have there, with Gary Hunter. He and I have had some discussion, and as we look through the zoning code, PUD is not a zoning district. PUD is an assignment attached to a project that has been reviewed in that manner. And the way the PUD regulations are written now, once you have your planned unit development approved, your zoning designation becomes PUD. Essentially, it functions as an overlay rather than a zoning district. A lot of communities do have PUD zones where they're trying to encourage mixed-use development in certain parts of their town. But in Athens, the way the PUD regulations are written, you can have a PUD in any zoning district. But PUD is not a zoning district. It's more like the weather protection ordinance or the land development ordinance or the floodplain, flood regulations. So, but anyway, that was just some clarification. I think
Okay,
that
but-
Mr. Key had asked me to run by Mr. Hunter.
But
But
it
that will
has
be
to-
coming up.
it has
As they
to be-
come in, they have to ask for zoning designation.
We
And,
don't
for
bring
example,
any,
once the PUD is presented, I mean, if the way I look at it, if University Estates would like to apply to the board as a planned unit development, which they couldn't do with their, what they did before, the only thing the code allowed for was either a commercial or a residential subdivision. PUDs weren't something that was applied outside the city necessarily. I know that their original presentation was they wanted to follow all of the requirements that the city had, even though they weren't in the city yet. But for example, if construction starts over there tomorrow on a house or a building, I doubt that they're going to apply for a city building permit. They're not in the city. But they do have to come in and ask for that zoning designation when they come in. If they wanted a PUD, they would have to present that to you. In my opinion, they'd have to come in as, it used to be that all lands came in as R1.
yeah.
And then they were changed from there if R1 was not the appropriate designation. The way the code's written now, you come in and you ask for a designation. Also, the way the code is written now, if the developer or the annexation petitioner doesn't come in to ask for zoning designation, the Planning Commission actually puts a designation to it. So one way or another, that area will have a zoning designation when it's annexed. I think the way the law's written now too, there's a period of time that it says the Planning Commission has to notify the annexation petitioner within a certain amount of time that they have received a copy of the annexation petition. Our code, the way it's written out too, says that the auditor will forward that information to the Planning Commission, although that petition doesn't go to the auditor. So I've given,
She gets it, the auditor gets it from the
yeah, I've given Ms.
county
Heck kind of a
commissioners.
heads up if she would happen to see it. And of course, I told Debbie Walker, Clerk of Council too, because she's the one that will receive it, that the Planning Commission does need it. It says that the Planning Commission will notify the petitioner within X amount of time and then a hearing will be scheduled. They can
20
ask for a
days.
designation or the Planning Commission can assign it on their own.
Okay, all right, so when we get it, we'll start to work. The other communication, there are copies of emails between Gary Hunter and Steve Pearson regarding the subdivision amendment procedure for Tom Lovedoll to follow. I have a question. Is this Gary Hunter's official opinion on this? And is an email an official opinion?
What I was trying to do was
suspect.
to expedite the process.
Yeah.
Mr. Lovedoll
Well, I
is
know
kind of in a
he's-
pinch.
Yeah, I know that.
And rather than wait for the planning commission or the law director to come up with a proper procedure, I recommended one that Mr. Hunter agreed with. He also, if you notice in that email back to me, said that the planning commission should recommend to council a specific procedure for such amendment, but that he thought for this one time only, that what I had described to him as an acceptable procedure, he had no issue with. Now, I guess the planning commission can do it that way, or you can do it a different way. All I was trying to do was to get something out on the table so we could get this moving for Mr. Lovedoll.
Well, I know, because he calls a lot. He's been waiting around and needed to have this. But I have, it's a serious question I have is an email, an official opinion of the law director. It is not signed by anybody, and it's just an email to and from, and it could be anybody. And I'm curious to know.
I'd say that would be a good question for the law director.
He'll never tell us.
To be
Well,
very honest with you, though, a lot of times to expedite things that I'm doing with Mr. Hunter, because his time is limited, I'll lay out scenarios and just ask if he agrees or disagrees. I do this routinely, to be honest with you.
well,
To
I
get answers
know
back
you
from the
do,
law
but
director.
I question whether we really should be operating that way, because he's the one that gets paid to be the law director.
Well,
But,
an official legal opinion is issued by the law director when something in writing is presented to him. I suppose then he does not consider email to be a written request for legal opinion.
well, but we did ask him, I think, in person for a legal,
But if he prints it out, it's in writing.
yeah.
I know that emails are public records, so. That's why I always try, when I do this too, I try to stay right with the facts. I don't mention names if I can. I don't mention addresses. I try to present scenarios, and given that information, I lay out a possible course of action. To be real honest with you, it makes it very efficient for me to work with the law director in that manner. I'm sure that if he thought there was something that was just off the wall or outrageous, he wouldn't have a simple statement. He'd probably say, "I disagree." Because a lot of times his responses are, "I agree," or "I think this is fine."
Well, with the last message in the series of emails is from you to him. Did you get an answer back before you went overseas? Back to this last
No.
detailed email with the,
Now, what had happened, I'd asked the law director, and he went out of the country for a while, because this issue has been on the table for quite a while. I thought that I had asked Gary about it previously. That's what that's about. I
But-
didn't know if it was,
But did
I
he-
hadn't sent it to him, or he hadn't sent an answer back to me.
okay, but you gave him this, on 9/25, you sent him this detailed procedure, and I don't see anything from him saying, yeah, looks good to me, or words to that effect. There's nothing, no more communication from him after you detailed the procedure. Take a look at the last one there and see, I don't see anything from Gary after that.
No, right here, you have to read it backwards. There's Mr.
Oh,
Hunt's answer
oh,
right there.
okay.
949, yeah.
Thank you, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't look
This-
at the
This is
dates.
the most
Where is
recent,
his-
this is the
where is
most
his
original.
Just above.
Yeah. This is starting right
Oh,
here.
this is his answer.
This is my
No,
original.
No, wait a minute. Okay,
This is my original
Yeah.
question to him, then I laid out the procedure.
okay.
Okay, what,
And
There's
then-
his response back to me.
Oh, okay,
on what
and
date?
there's your
Then there's
response.
something I sent back to him,
Okay,
and then here's where I just forwarded it.
okay. Start at the end and read forward.
Go backwards.
Email's got
Start there and
something
read
right
that. Okay. I see, all right.
There Where's his right up there, that 929 where he says?
Yeah, this is
right up
Gary's
here.
answer, and then this is Steve's answer to Gary, and, okay.
But I think what I did comment back on was Gary's little short comment that he thought this was fine for this one particular case, that the Planning Commission should look at a more detailed and a more formal way, a structured, written, something in writing that says, when you want to do a minor amendment to a plat that's already been approved, here's how you do it. Because the code now only says that the Planning Commission will have policies and procedures. But this is the first time it's happened, and we don't have them.
Isn't the law director supposed to write things that go in the law?
No, I think what he's asked is, what's the pleasure of the Planning Commission? How would they
Well,
like to
that
handle
he
it
write,
with the
he's a
council?
lawyer and he's the law director, and he should sit down and write what he finds acceptable by law and says, here, now, do you like this? And this is what they do other places. This is the body of law about this sort of thing. And instead of having us write it or you write it, I mean, I get a little annoyed at that sometimes. I was just expressing my opinion that I think it should be
I would say
handled
normally, though,
differently.
that's not how it happens. For example, the rewrite of the zoning code only was reviewed by the law director after Planning Commission and Council had worked on it. He had no
Oh, I know
involvement
that,
with
but
it.
we had lots of advice and we were working from another plan or the original ordinance and all sorts of information, but I felt there wasn't enough direction there either, so.
I thought we
If you'd
recommend,
want to send him something to say, Gary, can you recommend a procedure?
No,
suppose-
Gary, you write the procedures, what I would like to say to him. You write it. You're the law director. I may be way off base here, but I think that there's certain people who have certain jobs to do, and they should do them. I must be
can I go back
tired
to
today.
this, the Blackburn Woods for a minute?
Poor Mr.
Okay.
Lovedal's gonna get
I
into
thought
it.
at the last, couple of planning commission meetings ago, that we approved having 18 lots instead of
We
16.
did.
Yep.
So do we have to do anything else, or does it have to go to council now that we have
Well, I think-
recommended approval?
No, what we've gone through, what you went through was the way the law is written now. It is under the sole responsibility of the Planning Commission to approve minor changes to previously approved subdivisions. And that's why, though, for example, in my recommendation, I said there should be a sign-off line on the new plat for either the clerk or the president of council, just so that council knows here's what got changed, even though there's not a procedure set up that says they formally have to review it. They're at least going to have to sign off on it and acknowledge the fact that the Planning Commission did do a minor review. And I think that's what Gary's talking about, too. It might be that between the Planning Commission and the council, you might want to finally draw a line that says, here's where a Planning Commission can do a minor change, here's where we think it needs to come back to the council. I think that's kind of woven into his comment about the procedures that the Planning Commission should adopt. As you recall, I'd mentioned that Bob Eichenberg and I, the county planner, had talked about it, what could be considered minor enough that the Planning Commission could approve it without another review by the council. And we talked about, particularly in this case, the road's not changing, the water lines and sewer lines aren't changing. There's a minor impact of additional impervious surface, and the number of lots is requested additional is only 2. I had talked, Bob and I had talked about what would be minor. Would it be 10% of the lots approved, or 10%, no more than 3? You know, at some point, I guess what Gary's saying is it does need to be in writing for the sake of developers to know. If I want to modify a plan, I can, here's the procedure I have to go through for this much modification. I have to go back through the complete process if the modification is greater than that. Another thing you could say too, for example, if there's a realignment of a street or a realignment of a water or sewer line, that might be something that might be a point at which the Planning Commission would like to kick it on up to the level where council also has to review it.
But at this point, we're basically waiting for Mr. Lovedahl to bring us a plat with the engineers, a new plat with the engineer's signature on it, right?
Right. I had given to Melissa a copy of what you had reviewed that had lots I don't know, 3A and 13A or something like that. If it's all right with you, I'd like to recommend to Mr. Lovedahl that instead of having 16 lots, he just renumber them to 18 lots, and then submit that plat in the format that I outlined.
That seems reasonable since it hasn't been recorded yet anyway. It's
Well,
less-
that's right.
Less
It hasn't.
confusing than to have As and Bs.
Yep, and we won't, because it's not recorded too, there won't be, say, a recorded this won't have to be an amended plat or
Yeah.
a Phase 2 plat or something like this.
It's
Really,
not
this is
confused.
pretty clean and
Plat.
straightforward. It hasn't been, although approved quite a while back by council, Mr. Lovedahl had still not recorded the plat yet. And right now, too, all the property is still in his ownership. It's not like he sold lots off already and would need input, or input might be required from other property owners in the subdivision. He's the sole owner of all the property right now.
Who's SSD, who also has to sign it?
Service Safety Director.
Oh, okay.
I hate those things. What are those?
Yeah, he has to sign off acknowledging the water, sewer, and street, because eventually there'll be a point in time where the developer, by state law, has to write a letter to the Service Safety Director that says, my streets, my water lines, my sewer lines are now to a point where I would like you to take them over and initiate the bonding period, where the entire bond required for those installations is reduced to a maintenance bond. And I believe right now our subdivision regulations say 10% for 2 years. It used to say 1 year, but we find, particularly in the case of roadways, that they seem to fail right after 365 days.
Of course.
But normally, though, if they are going to deteriorate to a point, you see that deterioration between year 1 and year 2 is normally where it shows up. So that's why that was extended out to 2 years.
Okay. All right, so you'll notify him and he can get the
I'll just let him
things
know that
into
that's,
us.
and I did
Yeah.
forward that to Mr. Lovedahl. So just as soon as he has that plat generated, I'll make sure that it
It's,
makes it back around the horn and everybody gets has their chance to sign on the appropriate lines.
It's totally within the city, isn't it?
Yes.
Blackburn Woods, yeah.
Just up the street a little bit, it's outside the city, and just across the street on Blackburn, that's not in the city. It's right on the edge.
okay. All right, now we're at announcements, another
What's this?
business. Our next meeting is scheduled for, official meeting is November 3rd, and we will continue our Thursday workings on the comprehensive plan. And that's scheduled for 27th at 2 o'clock, and that will be in the mayor's conference room. It'll be earlier.
I will be gone on the 10th of November.
Okay, but the 3rd.
I know
you'll be
we
here.
won't be finished, but
Yeah,
I'll be here
okay,
for the 3rd.
Third, okay. Now it's opportunities for citizens to speak about items not covered on the agenda. Is there a citizen who wishes to speak? They don't want to speak. Okay. Minutes, it says none, but we do have minutes, don't we?
I gave them to you, but I
Yeah.
had not mailed them out.
Oh,
previously,
okay.
and I haven't had a chance to look them over.
Okay. I looked them over quickly and I didn't see anything, but that doesn't.
I move approval of the minutes.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Since we have it's not 4 o'clock yet, you have your little plans with you, so we can work on our little plan? Reviewing the city plan is. I think what we should do is probably adjourn the official meeting and then go into going over the.
Move for
because it's-
adjournment.
Okay. Harry, I guess you're in
I'll
favor of that.
move for adjournment.
Yeah, okay, at 3:15, and then we'll go into our work session, which is open to the public, of course, and work on the plan.